Daniel Crosslink, welcome back to yet another video. Today I'm reviewing the LOTMAXX SC-10 Shark 3D printer and we're starting right now. So this is it, the LOTMAXX SC-10 Shark dual color 3D printer, which can also do laser engraving. It was sent to me for a review by LOTMAXX, so thanks LOTMAXX for sending me this printer. And today I'm giving you my full review. More than 200 hours of test prints have gone through this printer and also a few minutes of laser engraving. So the focus was really on doing the 3D printing quality tests and also speed testing this printer, see how this is really working. If you missed my first video where I did the build, check it out, I've linked it up in this card up here. I've added video chapters to the description of this video, so if you want to jump to a specific part of this review, just go down, open the description box and click on the timestamp. So this printer looks quite familiar, obviously. As some of you stated in the last video's comment section, this looks pretty much like an upgraded Ender 3, but it's not really an Ender 3, it's somewhat different and we're gonna see this throughout the video. So this printer really builds fast, just compared to an Ender 3, because you brought it up. The Ender 3 build time is much more longer than this one. This literally just takes 5 minutes to build and then it's really ready to print in single color. And if you want to upgrade to the dual color mode, that's another 10 minutes of changing the nozzle and all the cables, but then it's ready to print dual color. And I think that's really amazing if you can do this in just 15 minutes. Talking about the build quality, the frame is made of aluminum, really sturdy frame, very good quality. There wasn't any issues when building this printer and I never had any kind of quality issues with any of the parts. So compared to an Ender 3, because you brought it up, the Ender 3 has its power supply on this extrusion mounted to the side, and I like the compact design of this printer much more because everything, the electronics, the power supply is in the base of this printer. So there is these compartments where everything is stored quite nicely. You can clearly do this on an Ender 3 as an upgrade process, but here it's already done and it looks much cleaner. Also, the plastic parts are not looking cheap, so it feels really nice, and that's also an advantage. One thing that is missing on this printer compared to newer Ender printers is it doesn't have belt tensioners. I think that's quite a missed opportunity. In the Kickstarter campaign, they have announced so many upgrades, but belt tensioners is really something so small and essential that this could have been in this printer. But you can easily upgrade these belt holders to belt tensioners, very similar to the ones on the Ender 3. So let's talk about the single color extrusion system that comes when the printer is in the box, and that works flawlessly. You've seen my first test print of this Happy Cat went out really smooth. There wasn't any issues with the surface, so that is really nice. And then I built the printer into a 2-color mode printer and started doing some test prints. And if you've seen my time-lapse video from last week, that has been some impressive dual color prints. However, there was some issues. We're going to talk about those issues in a moment, but overall I can say doing the dual color printing is really no problem, and I think you can really leave it in dual color mode all the time. One thing that you shouldn't forget, if you switch to the dual color mode and the BLTouch mode, you have to reflash the configuration to this printer. I forgot about it when I did this for the first time, and I was a little bit confused because the printer didn't recognize the second extruder motor and also it didn't recognize the BLTouch. So I had to go and change the configuration file and flash that again to the printer, and then it worked. The surface here is a removable metal plate which is flexible and is magnetic, and I really like that. It should be on every printer in my opinion. I really don't like the glass plate systems. With a glass plate you probably get a nicer surface sometimes if you prefer that, but there's all kinds of layer adhesion issues if using a glass plate, so you will have to use some sticky glue, and I really don't like that. So this kind of surface works really perfect. It's really super sticky, sometimes a little bit too sticky for my opinion. And one thing with the bed surface is really that it's a little bit lower in the middle, so I recognized that before I installed the BLTouch printer when I did the first test prints, that you really should install the BLTouch because the surface is not perfectly flat, and the BLTouch really is something that helps with layer adhesion if that is the case. Talking about the BLTouch, installation is really easy. It's just screwed to the side of the hot end And yeah, that's it. Basically just installing one more cable and then you're ready to go with the BLTouch. However, the cable management is something that I would like to see improved, because once you install the dual color printing module and the BLTouch, these two additional cables are hanging around and going to the front of the printer, but there's basically no desired path that it's just going. And so you have to figure out how to do this in a clean way. And then we have filament sensors on all extruders. I really like that. However, when I did test this, this only works if you are printing from the SD card of the printer. So if you know me, I'm a heavy Octoprint user, so almost all of my prints are done through Octoprint. I use the SD card just as an emergency solution normally, and the fact is, compared to the Ender 3 that I have running with Marlin firmware and a filament sensor, this filament sensor or these filament sensors on this printer only work if this printer is running from the SD card. If you run this from Octoprint and the filament runs out, Octoprint will not stop the print. It will just continue like there would be filament in. So this is a clear difference between Ender series and Marlin firmware probably and this printer. So just one thing to know if you're using Octoprint. So let's talk about the display here on the side. It's a removable touchscreen display. It's a nice idea to have it as a removable part, but I think it's not such a big advantage. It works, but I rarely took it off the plate and mostly left it where it is. One thing with the touch display that is a bit annoying is that the display is really slow. So the screen builds up like a C64 just from the ground up. So it's really slow. I'm wondering why that is the case. So that is clearly one thing to improve if possible, because every time to tap on the display, it takes a few seconds for the next menu to show up. So talking about the firmware upgrade on this printer that I did when I started this for the first time, that was pretty straightforward. The only thing that I already mentioned is that you have to make sure that you actually configure if there's a BLTouch and if it's in dual color printing mode. So let's talk about the print quality for a bit. And I started with this dual color frog here. This dual color frog I printed 2 times. The first one I printed in a little bit of a faster speed, that's called medium speed, and a second one that I printed at normal speed. So this is about 80 millimeter per second and the normal speed is 60 millimeter per second. And there's already a clear difference between these two models. The faster printed version has some artifacts and shows a little bit of a surface ripples and rest of filament, and that's probably because printing faster usually reduces quality, and this printer is no exception. The claim of the manufacturer is that this printer is printing 30% faster than other printers. In my opinion on this is true because the printing profiles that you get in the software are tuned for printing faster, but there's also profiles for printing at normal speed. And those normal speed profiles produce the same quality as another printer at the same speed. If you go faster, the print quality will degrade as expected. I didn't see why this is such a big advantage on this printer. Another thing with the dual color prints in general, and not specifically to this dual color frog, but with any dual color print, is if the color changes in the same layer, then you will get more artifacts than if the color is staying for a layer and then changing for the next layer. So this cone here, for example, is much better in quality because once the color is changed, it prints for a few layers and then the next color comes and then it also prints for a few layers. But the frog is clearly different. In every layer we have a color change and then in the next layer we have another color change. So I would go and print any dual color print, especially if every layer has both colors at a slower speed than you would normally do. I've done this Julia ways as a second example, and if you've seen my print video, the time-lapse video, I've linked it up here in the corner if you want to see it. It had some issues because the priming tower broke off the surface and then we get some stringing. So then I removed all the rest of filament from the side of this print and it looks pretty much as if it never happened. But there is a few issues left. The first thing noticeable here is that there is some layer shifts, and that means that somehow the nozzle ran into the part when it printed and it shifted the layer to the side. And this happened in the middle of the print and then again somewhere in the top of the print and then one last time at the very end of the print. So I was curious what caused this issue and I switched to printing the same Julia vase again, but without a priming tower. And I was thinking like, maybe this will look different because the priming tower probably caused some issues. It broke off. So maybe that was the reason for the layer shifting, but it wasn't. The layer shifting happened again, and the first actually happened almost at the same height, if not really exactly at the same height, and then again in the upper parts of the print, and then again at the very end of the print. So this looks like a problem that has nothing to do with the priming tower, but probably more with the fact how this print model is designed, because I printed another dual color print, this world globe, and that is pretty much the same height than the Julia vase. It also has dual colors. It also has both colors in one layer, so every color is in every layer, and this doesn't have any kind of layer shifting problems. There was a under extrusion problem somewhere in the middle of the print, but that was just in this part of the print and it didn't repeat in any other part of the print. So coming back to the Julia vase, probably enabling Z-hop when retracting could have fixed this problem. I didn't repeat it a third time, so this problem never came back and I didn't invest any more time into this because I printed other things. For example, this dice tower here. This is a single color print, no layer shifting visible, so really came out nice and clean. Then I did this print in place mechanic box, which is closing and then opening by pushing a button. So this comes out really, really clean. I've printed another mechanical box with a lid that also opens without any issues. Looks really nice and the quality and result is also very good. Then I printed this special vase from Geeky Faye. By the way, I've linked all the parts that I'm showing you here in the video description so you can download those STL files, and credits go to the creators, of course. Thanks for putting those amazing things on Thingiverse and My Mini Factory. So this vase came out pretty well, except there's also some minor layer shifting here. And I also didn't enable Z-hop on retract. This is a very difficult print, to be honest. You have to enable cooling and print very, very slow. But I said, well, let's print it at normal speed and let everything on the default settings. And I've got some little problems here in the middle of the print, but other than that, this looks pretty good. Then I did the Sigma dual color tower, which also came out really, really nice, though this result is pretty much perfect. Then we have the Superman figure here from Eastman, also an amazing print. I've printed this with Octoprint and then I realized printing with Octoprint, some people always say Octoprint causes all kinds of issues with blobbing because it is slower or the data transfer rate is sometimes not high enough for the printer. So this is actually true if the printer prints faster than the data transfer rate from Octoprint to the printer, it can get into stuttering, and this stuttering can cause little but visible blobs on your surface, and this happened for this print. So probably repeating this, printing just from the SD card might remove those issues, or just printing at a little bit of a slower speed might also resolve this issue. But other than that, this looks pretty perfect. Then we have these dual color dice. These dual color dice came out pretty much perfect, except I've seen that probably enlarging the priming tower sometimes is necessary if you have a lot of color changes in the layers, and then you have to play around with the size and the diameter of the priming tower to get perfect results. Otherwise, you will get some color mixing in the prints, and this happened for these dice at some point. You will see that some of them are pretty much perfect and others have some color mixing. And then as a final thing, I wanted to test out the laser module. The laser module is an add-on that you can get for this device. You can buy it with the printer only. I think it's not available as a separate part, and it's just mounted by plugging it in the front and then mounting this laser head just instead of the BLTouch sensor here on the side. It's pretty easy to mount. Talking about the quality of the laser engraving, the result is pretty much okay, I would say. You can do laser engraving on different materials. However, the problem with this mode is I think the design of this device is clearly not for laser engraving, and there is a few small issues. The first one is mounting any kind of thing on the surface of this printer. There is no desired method to do this except using these little clamps, but it's also possible to do this with tape. Other devices that have a special plate for that also have special clamping mechanisms where you can screw on the parts that you want to fix, and then you can do the laser engraving on almost any kind of shaped part. Here it's a little bit more difficult. The second issue that I had with the laser module is that setting the distance of the laser to the surface to be perfectly focused, it's done by adjusting the Z height of this axis, but the thing is it's not fixed. So every time you start again or you switch out the laser for the BLTouch and you go back to 3D printing and then back to laser engraving, you have to readjust the Z distance once again. And another problem with that is that when you do enable the laser for checking the focus, it's always at maximum power, which is, I think, really dangerous. So if you remember my review of the, what was it, the Ortor Laser Master, where you can set the laser intensity for adjusting the focus to such a low intensity that never anything gets burnt. You can bring your hand underneath even and nothing happens. But this one is really running at full power, so it starts burning into the surface while you're doing the laser focus adjustment. I think that's just a big problem. I wouldn't actually recommend using this laser module. So let's get back to some problems and how to resolve them. You've seen the layer shifting problems. I think Z-Top on Retract would be a solution for this. The other problem, the under extrusion that I had in some of the prints, especially on this one, you probably have to adjust the voltage of the extruder motors. What I've seen is that sometimes these extruder motors do skip, and you see it especially if the material is maybe a little bit older, it's a little bit more brittle, or probably a little bit indifferent in the diameter, and then this thing gets into troubles and sometimes starts clicking. So probably adjusting the voltage to a higher voltage on the mainboard, it's possible, and it's probably a solution to fix this issue, just that the motors have a little bit more power to push through the filament in some of these extreme situations. Another thing that I had to adjust by a little bit was dimensional accuracy, also known as steps per millimeter. So this is normally done on any printer. Before you start printing anything, you should go and print such a test tube, and the test cube normally should come out as exactly 20 by 20 by 20 millimeters. And if you figure out that this is not the case, if this cube is a little bit larger in any dimension, you will have to readjust the steps per millimeter settings on your printer. This is not only true for the LOTMAXX, but it's also true for Ender printers and any other printers, and it can be done through the firmware with using some G-codes. So to make this easy, I'm going to post a video specifically about this topic, how to do it on any printer that supports the specified G-code commands. Watch out for that video. I'm gonna link it up here in the corner once it's available, and you will see it on my channel. So after I've done that, the print quality was absolutely perfect, and I can really just recommend doing this for all of the axes and also adjusting the steps per millimeter for the extruder, specifically for these kind of prints here. When you do mechanical parts, it's really important that you have dialed in your steps very well. Other things to mention about this device. There is this special cooling system here on the hot end, and it's noticeably different from other printers. So the first motor here, which is always visible on the front, that is of course the motor that's always running, that's cooling the hot end so filament doesn't get stuck in the melting zone. But there's also 3 additional fans here that are not visible on the first side. They are underneath this HUD here, and they blow to the surface. And the problem with those motors is I think they are not very strong in the first place, and if just the slightest part of filament, just a little bit of a stringing or something that's flying up in the air from the build surface, if that gets stuck into one of these little propellers, they immediately stop working. And that happened during the Julia base print. I didn't realize it in the first moment, but there was just a little string of filament getting stuck in one of those motors here, and it just stopped working until I pulled it out. So I think the design of this cooling system is not particularly super exciting, and I would go and replace it with something with more power that blows stronger, because I also realized that the amount of air flowing through these little tiny propellers here is not overwhelmingly much, and I had better results with other designs, specifically on the Ender 3, if you've seen that modification on my channel already. Another little problem is if you want to do one color printing, single color printing, and you don't have filament in the second extruder, specifically in the second filament sensor, the printer will stop printing in the beginning of the print and wait until you insert something into the second filament sensor. So my hack for this is to put in a rest of filament into the second sensor if you just have your filament spool sitting on the first extruder, so it doesn't get stuck in the beginning of the print. Another thing, if you want to do Octoprint with this device, you will notice that once you start printing from Octoprint, there's actually no sign visible on the display that this printer is actually doing something, that it's printing something. Also, the nozzle or the bed temperature is not visible on the screen if you are printing from Octoprint. So if you're getting used to something like the Ender 3, and there's also always visible the temperature and the state of the printer, and Octoprint is going to send over, for example, the state that it's printing. This is all not visible on this device when you print from Octoprint. So this is a little bit of a downer. I also reached out to LOTMAXX because I wanted to use the time lapse, the Octolapse plugin with Octoprint with this printer, and it didn't work in the beginning because there was a command missing in the firmware, the M114. This is very specific and very special, but I reached out to them and I asked them, can you add this command because this is necessary? And once they fixed the issue, Octolapse worked with this printer. So overall, I would say this is a very good value for the money. The setup time is really quick. You do 5 minutes of setup and you can start printing in single color. And if you do another 10 minutes of installation of the dual color head, you can start dual color printing in 15 minutes from the unboxing. And the printer just works. I mean, it just works. And that's good because you get it out of the box, you get it running, and it just works as expected. There wasn't any kind of big issues. So who should buy this printer? I would say if you're the person who wants to get started quickly, this is the printer for you. If you don't want to tinker around a lot and modify this printer like crazy, this is the device for you. If you find that you're getting a closed source firmware and not being able to upgrade to modern firmware, if you don't want to invest time in that, this is the printer for you. So if you want this all-in-one device, dual color printing, and maybe laser engraving with some of the things that I've mentioned to be accounted for, but then this might be the device for you. So who should not buy this printer? If you don't need laser engraving, I wouldn't buy the upgraded module for that. Save the money because for the mentioned reasons, I don't think that this is the right device for laser engraving. If you want to tinker around a lot and modify your device quite a lot, like I did with my Ender 3, for example, this might not be the device for you for a few reasons. Because first, there isn't a lot of modifications available. The community around this device isn't that large. If you compare it to other models like the ANIT A8, for example, that had been around for years, and the Ender models and other printers, there is huge community around those other printers. And if you're looking for modifications and guidance and people who have experience, this might not be the device for you. Then if you want to run Marlin firmware on this device, and I have Marlin firmware on all of my printers. I was always looking for a printer that can run Marlin firmware. I was checking if there is a community around it and if it's supported. This device doesn't support Marlin firmware, so if you want that, this might be not the device for you. And again, if you're looking for a large community of other people using this device, this might also not be the device for you. So that's it about this printer. I hope you enjoyed this review. So if you liked this video, please hit the like button. And if you didn't like this video, feel free to hit the dislike button. twice. I hope to see you next time on this channel for another video about 3D printing, 3D scanning and more. Bye bye.